I've always been really interested in natural arrow points like bone and antler and stone. The stone, I don't know how to flint knap yet, and I got plans for a future video for that, learning how to flint knap. I do want to try some bone, which I have, and antler, and even wood. We're gonna start with bone. I got the leg bone or cannon bone of a deer, and I got a diagram here of where you can find it. And we're gonna just use some hand tools to make it. Right about in this area is where we're looking for the broadhead that I'm thinking. And it's just gonna be a lot of filing, sanding, and grinding it down until we get the shape that we want. So let's get to work. I began to cut off the total length of the broadhead, but decided to stop and to leave it all as one bone, so I still had something to grab onto with the vise. And that way I could have a good grip while I rasp and file away on it first, and then I'll cut it off. It did break when I was rasping where I started to cut it, which was to be expected. Luckily, it's still savable, I believe. So I think what I'm going to do is take a hacksaw blade and go right down like this way with it to help reduce a lot of bone so I don't have to file all of that. Now it's a matter of probably seeing them and doing. So I was able to get 2 broadheads out of that one leg bone, which was great. I didn't expect that. Just by sawing it down the center, that did work. And I was looking at this larger leg bone here, and I was thinking you could probably get an arrowhead out of the other end as well. This is the end I got these from on both sides, right there and there. But also I thought, oh, maybe if they're big enough, leg bone, you could probably get an arrowhead out of that side and even this side by sawing it down the center. So you possibly could get 4 out of one leg bone, which would be great because it is a lot of work to grind these down. So for my 2 wooden arrowheads, I decided to use shagbark hickory. It's probably one of the hardest woods I have in my local area. I'm going to make a couple arrowheads out of it. One, I'm not going to do anything to it. The other one, I'm going to try to fire harden it and see if that helps hold an edge, see if it's stronger. So I'm really curious to see how that'll turn out. The wooden arrowheads, pictures I've seen from historical arrows, have all been one piece from knock all the way to the tip, all just been one piece of wood with the arrowhead included. I've never seen wooden tie-on ones or socketed ones. So that got me thinking, what if you have a good arrow shaft, but you don't have access to bone or antler or something like that to make an arrowhead from? Can you make a separate arrowhead from wood and tie it on or even glue it on? So that's what I'm going to try with today, is try to make a couple arrowheads. I'm going to try to make one that's not heat treated, one that I'm going to heat it up and see if that makes the edge better. And see how good of an arrowhead that makes and if it is doable to tie it onto an existing arrow shaft. So far. Yeah, I think we'll just stick with the sandpaper now.
Yeah, be careful even doing this because I don't want it to break. It's so thin.
So I made 2 wooden arrowheads, and I got thinking, ooh, what about a socketed arrowhead? And how cool that'd be to glue it on. And I'm going to try that, but I'm not sure how it's going to work because it is wood and it's a very fine hole with a very fine shank there to drill into. So it could split, it could break, but I left a little extra wood on the sides. Hopefully it won't do that, but I want to try it anyway, see what happens. So I'm drilling down about an inch or so with the smaller bit. It's not the same size as my arrow shaft, but then I'm going to try a little bit bigger bit and only go about 1/2 inch down, so about half the length of the hole, hoping that the tapered end of my arrow shaft will fit in there nice and snug. But using this little hand drill it's kind of difficult trying to be straight and crank at the same time. It definitely takes a little bit more time and work, but I'm okay with that. It's good for me to slow down and just take my time. We're getting close now. Let me try it fit. We'll go a little bit further. I think using a hardwood is definitely a good idea for this. Something a lot softer might split and break a lot easier. I like how that's fitting. Alright, let's try a little bit bigger of a bit. Please don't split. Ooh, but I'm getting a pretty tight fit though. Interesting. Maybe that will work. Let's try it. I gotta finish shaping that out. Maybe that'll work. I'm curious. With the antler, I tried to make a broadhead from it, but it just didn't work out very good. Antler is really hard material to rasp or sand on. That's why I thought, hey, make a good broadhead. But antler also curves and twists. It's really hard to find a long enough flat spot where you can get a good broadhead from. This one just wasn't the one. I thought maybe I could try to plane one side and flatten it. I got one edge that's really bold, one edge that's really straight, and it's still got a bowl in it, and I just don't think I can make a really good broadhead from it. But I do think if you found the right antler that's got a flat enough spot, straight enough, you might be able to make a nice broadhead from it. Because I do think it would hold a good edge and not be as brittle as bone. So I think for now I'm just going to try to make hard point tips off the antlers for my arrow points until I find that right antler. I guess I'm looking for a decently straight tip that's big enough at the base that I can drill a hole in it. I'm going to try to make a socketed, pointed antler tip. I might do one that's just pointed, but then I might do one that I can maybe put a couple bevels on. Because like right there, that one's kind of flat. I might be able to get some. But the problem is with the antler, I got that curve to work with. That one might work for like a double-edged. Grind that down to a sharp point. Maybe put a little bevel on it. Maybe that one. And then a sharp point, maybe something like that. It's skinny all the way through, so that might just make a really good pointed antler tip. I'm not as worried with the antler as I was with the wood, because antler definitely seems to be really tough and durable and doesn't really split like along the grain like wood would. I kind of like working with antler because it's not so brittle. And I also think that's going to help out with it being a good arrowhead. I don't think it's going to be very brittle. I think you'll get multiple uses out of the antler arrowhead than versus a bone one or even a wood one. They might only be one use arrowheads or just a couple use arrowheads is my prediction. But the antler one, I kind of think you'll be able to reuse it over and over. So I did get a broadhead out of antler. Unfortunately, it was late at night. I was experimenting with it and I didn't get it on camera, but I still wanted to share where I got it from. So with this antler, for example, at the base of the tines, I got it right out of there, right kind of where there's a palming or a wide spot. I was able to find one flat enough and wide enough that I could cut and carve this out of it. It is doable, and I'm excited to have it to try out in the test and see how it holds up as a broadhead. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about tying on the arrowheads, as I have an old video that kind of shows all that. But in that video, I did use bigger chunks of sinew, and it was bulky and it wasn't as neat looking. And plus it did cause a little bit of problems of catching my hand or catching the bow as the arrow would fly off the string. So what I did do in this was use finer strands of sinew, and that worked a lot nicer, a lot neater, a lot cleaner, a lot smaller fit. So just wanted to let you guys know that's something I learned.
So I'm not gonna do a real extensive test. I'm just gonna shoot these arrows into a target bag to see how far they go in. I'll put the results on the screen. All I'm using for a bow is a 50-pound at 28-inch stick bow that I made in my first video. So interesting results from the arrows. The bone went the furthest and it was the lightest broadhead. So I was kind of surprised by that because the other ones were heavier, but they didn't go as far. And might make sense too because they just more to push through. The bone definitely performed the best. I think Antler, if you were to get it smaller, I think it would also perform as well and not be as brittle because both bone arrow tips did break. I thought that was interesting with that. And the wood, was kind of as I would expect, not very deep penetration, but if you made that much smaller, I'm afraid it would break as well. So interesting results. I'm glad I did it, and I'm glad that if you guys made it this far, that you tagged along and watched, and I can't wait for the next thing that we try out.